My parents left me out of their will for being too independent, so I exposed their secrets and watched everything fall apart at the funeral. I'm a 28-year-old man, and I've always been labeled the independent one in my family. Not in a proud you've got this kind of way, more like a we don't need to worry about him kind of way. Ever since I was a kid, I got the message loud and clear. Don't expect much. Not help, not praise, not attention. Just handle your stuff quietly and stay out of the way. It started small. While my younger siblings, Ella and Max, got bedtime stories, warm milk, and help with homework, I was told things like, "You're a smart kid. Figure it out." I learned how to cook my own breakfast by age 9. By high school, I was working weekends at the local hardware store while Max crashed his second bike and Ella got her third phone because the camera was better. I didn't even have a phone until I was 17. I thought maybe they were just trying to prepare me for the real world. I actually convinced myself for years that this was love, tough love. But over time, it stopped feeling like guidance and started feeling like abandonment dressed up as responsibility. When it came time for college, I didn't even bother asking for help. I applied for scholarships, juggled 3 part-time jobs, and lived in the cheapest basement studio I could find. Meanwhile, my siblings were still getting their laundry folded by my mom and emergency cash from dad every other month. I never resented them for it, at least not back then. I figured maybe I was just wired differently. Maybe I didn't need what they needed, but that illusion shattered the year I came home for Thanksgiving and found out I'd been replaced. If there's one thing my parents truly worshipped, it wasn't God or family. It was appearances. How we looked to the outside world meant more than how we actually treated each other. Every Christmas card photo had to be professionally done, coordinated outfits and fake smiles mandatory. Every post on my mom's Facebook was a carefully staged performance, so proud of Ella's honor roll. Max just got accepted into a business workshop. Even though he flunked 2 classes that semester, me? I wasn't in a single picture for 4 straight years. Not even a mention. The craziest part? When I confronted my mom once about it, she gave this little laugh and said, "Well, honey, you don't really do anything that's post-worthy, do you?" That stung in a way I can't explain. I was busting my ass just to survive out there, and because I didn't have a shiny certificate or a curated selfie to show for it, I didn't exist. Even the house was curated. It looked like a showroom, like no one actually lived there. I remember one Thanksgiving when I accidentally placed a water bottle on the wrong part of the table, and my dad snapped, "We have guests. Don't embarrass me." Guests. There were no guests. Just family. I started realizing that my role in their script was to disappear unless I could contribute to the illusion. When I graduated college, first in the family to do so without a cent from them, they didn't come to the ceremony. Said it was too far and that I'd be fine on my own. I was. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. And that hurt only deepened the day I found out just how far. They were willing to go to erase me from the narrative. One of the weirdest things about growing up in my family is how invisible I was when it came to actual decisions. I was never asked to weigh in on anything, just informed after the fact. Whether it was selling my childhood piano without telling me, moving into a new house and not giving me the address for months, or planning family trips while I worked 2 jobs, I was always the last to know. If I asked why, my mom would brush it off with a casual, "Oh, you're always busy," or worse, "You're so independent. We figured you wouldn't care." That phrase became their shield. Every time I questioned why I wasn't included, it would get tossed back like a compliment, even though it felt like a punch in the gut. I remember one time my cousin Julia got engaged, and the entire family was flying to California for her engagement dinner. I found out 2 days before the flight during a random call with Max. "Wait, you're not going?" he asked. I hadn't even received the invitation. Turns out it had been sent to the group chat, the one I wasn't in. When I brought it up, my mom said, "You wouldn't have been able to take off work anyway, right? We didn't want to stress you out." What they called consideration felt more like erasure. It wasn't even just big events. It was birthdays, illnesses, new jobs, deaths. I found out everything late, like I was some distant relative instead of their son. The worst part? They truly believed they were doing me a favor. Like excluding me was an act of respect for my independence. It was sickening. I started pulling away emotionally. I stopped trying to insert myself into a narrative they clearly didn't want me in. I figured if I was always going to be treated like an outsider, maybe I should start acting like one. But then came the dinner that would finally show me just how deep that exclusion ran. It happened during a casual family dinner, the kind I rarely attended anymore. My dad had insisted I come home for a family night, probably to save face since some distant relatives were visiting. I almost didn't go, but something told me I should. The night felt off from the start. I was seated at the far end of the table like a +1 at my own family's meal. Everyone was laughing, drinking wine, and catching up. I mostly stayed quiet, picking at my plate, listening. Then it happened. My brother Max leaned in toward my cousin Ben and said, "Guess who got cut out of the will?" They both laughed, quietly, but not quietly enough. I froze. I wasn't sure I heard it right at first. But then Ben replied, "Seriously? That's brutal. What did he do?" And Max, without even looking in my direction, smirked and said, "Nothing. That's the point. He's too independent. Doesn't need it, apparently." The blood drained from my face. I felt like I'd been slapped across the chest with an open hand. I got up and walked to the kitchen under the pretense of grabbing water, trying to calm the storm inside me. My parents never discussed wills with us, ever. I didn't even know they'd written one. After dinner, I pulled my mom aside and asked, "Is it true? Am I not in the will?" She didn't even flinch. She sighed like she was tired of the drama and said, "Sweetheart, you're doing great. You don't need our help. We thought you'd understand." I don't remember what I said after that. I think I just left. All I knew was this: it wasn't about the money. It was about what they really thought of me. That I was a footnote, disposable, unnecessary, and that realization lit a fire in me I didn't know I had. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in my apartment staring at the ceiling in silence. The city noise outside was muffled by the weight in my chest. It wasn't the money. God, it was never about the money. I was doing fine on my own. Better than fine, actually. I'd built a life from scratch without a penny from them. But still, hearing that I'd been cut out of their will, hearing it passed around like some inside joke, it broke something in me. It wasn't about the inheritance. It was about the meaning behind it. I'd spent years convincing myself that being left out was just the price of being strong, that they didn't coddle me because they respected me, that maybe my absence from family photos, parties, vacations, it wasn't personal. But that night at the dinner table made it brutally clear I wasn't respected. I wasn't even seen. I was just removed, like a mistake they edited out of their perfect picture. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed with my head in my hands, replaying my mom's words. "We thought you'd understand." No apology. No regret, just an assumption that I'd quietly accept being erased, because I always had before. That was the night I stopped trying to earn their approval. That was the night I realized that being independent in their eyes didn't mean strong, it meant expendable. And when I looked around my small but peaceful apartment, the framed degree I earned alone, the bills I paid myself, the life I built without them, I realized I had nothing left to prove. But I still had questions, and when I went digging for answers, I found something so much worse than I ever expected. For days after that dinner, I didn't call, didn't text. I let the silence grow heavy between us, like smoke thickening in a room with no windows. I was done. I even started drafting a goodbye letter in my head. No drama, no rage. Just a clean break from a family that never really treated me like one of their own. But while going through an old storage box, one I hadn't touched since I moved out at 19, I found a sealed envelope wedged between tax returns and my high school yearbook. It was old, yellowing, and had my dad's handwriting on the front. Private, Dad's eyes only. My first instinct was to toss it. But curiosity won. Inside were a stack of neatly folded documents, bank transfers, emails, even a notarized agreement. The kind of stuff you don't keep unless you're trying to bury something. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at, until I saw the name. A woman's name I'd never heard before. Followed by a child's name with our last name, it felt like my blood turned to ice. Emails were dated back to the early 2000s. They mentioned keeping things quiet, monthly, payments, and most disturbingly, "We don't want this getting to the kids." It didn't take much to put it together. My dad had an affair and, from the looks of it, a child. A child no one ever told us about. A half-sibling I never knew existed. I sat there in stunned silence, documents spread across the floor, my hands shaking. The betrayal I thought I knew was just the tip of the iceberg. I wasn't just excluded from the will, I was raised inside a carefully managed lie. And now I was holding the receipts for the first time in my life. I had leverage. Once I knew what I was looking for, I couldn't stop. It was like finding the first crack in a dam and watching the water force its way through. I spent that entire weekend poring over every detail in those documents, cross-referencing names, matching dates, scanning old photos. I even pulled out my dad's old planner I'd somehow ended up with in a move. I was hunting for a pattern, a gap, anything that might tell me more about this mystery sibling. Then I found it. Tucked into the back of the planner was a Polaroid. It wasn't labeled, but the man in it was unmistakably my dad, only younger, maybe mid-30s, standing next to a woman who wasn't my mother. She had dark hair and wore a shy smile. Next to them, a toddler, maybe 2 years old. The kid had our last name scribbled in faded pen on the back. I turned the photo over again and again, like it would magically offer more answers. I decided to reach out to our old neighbor, Mrs. K, who had lived across the street from us for decades. She was the type who remembered everything. Over coffee, I casually mentioned the name I'd found. She went quiet. Then she said, "I always wondered if anyone in your family knew. Your father had that woman working in your house for almost 2 years. Then one day, poof, gone. Your mom wouldn't even say her name." Suddenly, my entire childhood felt like a carefully staged performance. How much had been scripted? How much had been covered up just to maintain the image of the perfect family? I knew then, this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about protecting a lie, one that I was never meant to uncover, and the closer I got to the truth, the more I realized I wasn't the only one they'd tried to erase. I wasn't prepared for what I found next. A few days after speaking with Mrs. K, I reached out to a private investigator, a friend of a friend who owed me a favor. I gave him everything I had, the names, the emails, the blurry photo. I expected it to take weeks. It took 4 days. "I think I found your guy," the PI said over the phone. "He lives 2 towns over. Quiet life. Name's Daniel. He's 32. My hands went numb. I spent hours debating whether to reach out. What if he didn't know? What if he hated us? But deep down, I needed to see him, to know how much of his life had been shaped by the same people who shaped mine and then abandoned him. I messaged him. Short. Honest. "I think we might be brothers. Can we talk?" To my shock, he replied within the hour. "I've been waiting for this my whole life." We met at a small diner off the highway. He looked like my dad, same tired eyes, same stiff jawline. But his posture was different, guarded, wounded. I introduced myself, and he didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, "So they finally told you?" I shook my head. "No, I found out by accident," he smiled bitterly. Figures. Over coffee, he told me everything. The payments. The silence. The warning from my dad. Never contact us again. He'd grown up just a few miles from us, always wondering who his siblings were, why he wasn't allowed near. He said he used to ride his bike past our house just to see if anyone looked like him. I had thought I was the outcast. But Daniel? Daniel had been ghosted from birth, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't just the forgotten son. I was the lucky one. After meeting Daniel, everything changed. I couldn't unsee the truth. Every memory I had of my parents, the way they always insisted on control, perfection, secrecy, it all felt like part of a carefully scripted performance. But now I wasn't just some confused kid looking for answers. I had evidence. I had receipts. With Daniel's permission, I started compiling everything. Scanned copies of the emails, the payment logs, the notarized agreement, the photo of my dad holding Daniel as a baby. I backed it all up twice on encrypted drives. I even recorded a long audio message of Daniel telling his story in his own words. He was hesitant at first, but when he finished, he looked at me and said, "If they won't give me my name, at least give me the truth." That hit me like a freight train. For days, I debated what to do with it. I could go public. I could send it to everyone, relatives, family, friends, the church they used to run fundraisers at. Or I could just walk away, disappear with this knowledge and never look back. But something in me changed. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. I saved all the files in a folder on my desktop titled The Real Legacy. I didn't send it, not yet. But just knowing it was there, ready, Felt like the first time I'd ever had power in this family. Not money, not status, just the ability to tell the truth and make it stick. I told Daniel he could walk away from all of it if he wanted to. He deserved peace. He nodded and said, "I will. But I hope someday they'll have to hear me speak." I promised him they would. And life stayed quiet until one cold morning when everything changed with a single phone call. It was a Tuesday morning when I got the call. I was halfway through pouring coffee when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it ring out until something in my chest told me to pick up. It was Max. His voice was flat, no warmth, no pretense. Dad's dead, just like that. No, hey, no, how are you, no emotion. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt numb. Not shocked, just hollow. I hadn't spoken to Dad in over a year, not since that dinner where I learned I didn't even belong in their financial afterlife. Max said the funeral was in 3 days. "You can come if you want," he muttered, like he was offering me the scraps of some pity invitation. I asked if Mom wanted me there. He didn't answer. The line just went dead. 3 days later, I showed up anyway. I wore a plain black suit, no frills, no expectations. When I arrived at the church, the place was already packed, but no one acknowledged me. Not even my mother. She was standing near the front with Ella, both dressed like actresses on a stage, eyes dry, expressions blank. There was a giant photo of my father at the altar, smiling, regal, the man everyone thought he was. But I wasn't in any of the slideshow images. Not once. It was like I never existed. I sat in the back row alone, watching this carefully curated send-off for a man who had mastered the art of hiding, and then, as I looked through the printed obituary someone passed to me, my name wasn't listed, not even in the survived by section. I wasn't just cut from the will, I was cut from his life. I didn't think I could feel lower than I did sitting in the back of that church, watching strangers cry harder for my father than I ever could. But the universe had one more kick in the ribs waiting for me. After the final hymn, people began filtering outside for the burial. I stayed seated, unsure if I was even welcome to follow. As I stood to leave, a woman I didn't recognize, one of my dad's longtime colleagues, I assumed, brushed past me and whispered, "I thought the whole family was supposed to sit up front." Her tone was sharp, disapproving. I just gave a tight smile. She didn't know. How could she? But then I felt a hand on my arm. It was Ella. Her expression was tight, eyes darting around like she didn't want to be seen talking to me. "Hey," she said under her breath. "Mom's not comfortable with you being here. She says, this day isn't about digging up old wounds." I blinked at her. "She wants me to leave?" Ella hesitated, then nodded. "You've already made things tense. Please, just go. Don't cause a scene." Tense? I hadn't even spoken to anyone. I hadn't done anything, but that was always my role, wasn't it? The unwanted variable? The one that didn't fit the family script. I was never supposed to be in the photos. Never supposed to inherit. Never supposed to exist publicly. I stepped out into the sunlight, chest burning. People glanced at me as I walked down the steps like I was some estranged cousin who showed up drunk. I didn't go to the burial. I didn't say goodbye. Not to my father, not to anyone. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying not to scream. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. They had buried my father, but they'd erased me long before he ever died. And now? I was done staying silent. I went home in a haze. I don't remember the drive. I don't remember unlocking the door. All I remember is sitting on the edge of my bed, suit jacket still on, tie pulled loose, staring at my laptop like it was a weapon. I opened the folder. The Real Legacy. For months, I'd told myself it wasn't time, that I didn't want to hurt anyone. That revenge would make me just like them. But after being erased at my father's funeral, after being asked to leave by my own sister, I knew this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about exposure, about breaking the illusion they had built and maintained for decades, about making sure Daniel's truth and mine could no longer be swept under the rug. I uploaded the file to a cloud drive and created a private, unlisted link. I drafted an email with a subject line that simply read, "For those who still believe in truth." And then I sent it, not to the public, not to the media, just to a carefully selected list, extended family, longtime friends of my parents, a few people from church, and, crucially, the family lawyer. People who mattered to them, people who would care. And to my siblings, I sent a hard copy of the evidence by courier, along with a handwritten note that read, "You said I was too independent to need anything, so I finally took something back, the truth." I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry either. I just lay in bed listening to the silence, only this time, it didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like power. They had cut me out of their legacy, so I gave them a new one, and by morning, everything they tried to hide would be impossible to bury. By 9 a.m. the next morning, the group chat I'd been excluded from for years was blowing up. I didn't even have to check it. Ella forwarded me screenshots, along with a frantic voicemail. "What the hell did you do?" Mom's losing it. "People are calling. This is disgusting." "No, Ella. What you did was disgusting." One by one, the dominoes started falling. My aunt, my dad's only sister, called me in tears. She said, "I always knew something wasn't right. Thank you for telling the truth." Family friends who had attended the funeral were reaching out too, not with anger, but with questions. "Is this real? How long did you know? Why didn't anyone say anything?" My mother tried to call 5 times that day. I didn't pick up. Instead, I watched quietly from the sidelines as the curated image of our family began to unravel. The pastor from their church reached out to my uncle, asking why Daniel had never been acknowledged if they'd known about him for years. My dad's business partner reportedly backed out of a charity fund in his name. My mother had to cancel a garden club luncheon because the air was too thick with gossip. And Max? Mr. Goldenchild. He posted some cryptic quote on Instagram about family being complicated, then vanished for a week. Couldn't even handle the fire without hiding, but the best part? Daniel messaged me that night. One sentence. "For the first time, I feel real." I read it 10 times. This wasn't just justice. It was correction, not vengeance, balance. They spent years sculpting a version of reality that erased the people who didn't fit their fantasy. And now, with one click, I shattered it. I didn't yell. I didn't fight. I just exposed what was already there and let the truth do what it always does. Burn quietly. Then explode. A few days after the fallout, I got a call from one of my cousins, Lisa. She'd always been kind to me, even when the rest of the family treated me like a distant acquaintance. She didn't waste time. "Can I get Daniel's number?" she asked. I hesitated. "Why?" she paused, then said, "Because he's family, and we were robbed of that." I sent it. What happened next was something I didn't even dare hope for. One by one, people started reaching out to Daniel. Not out of pity, not out of guilt, but out of genuine interest. To learn who he was. To apologize. To see him. Lisa invited him to a small get-together. He showed up nervous, hands shaking, unsure if he was walking into a trap. But when he entered the room, she hugged him like she'd known him her whole life. Others followed. They asked about his job, his hobbies, his childhood. No one mentioned my parents. Daniel told me afterward that it was the first time he'd ever felt like he belonged somewhere. I think that's what hit me the hardest. They had denied him a seat at the table for 32 years. Lied to him, paid him off, ghosted his entire existence just to preserve a fantasy. And now, the truth had done what their money never could. It had brought him home. I watched from a distance that night. I didn't need to be the center of it. I'd had my say. I'd done what I set out to do. Daniel laughed freely, his voice no longer cautious, no longer small. For the first time, the person they tried to erase was being celebrated. And I knew. Something had shifted permanently. It arrived 3 weeks after the funeral. A cream-colored envelope with my name on the front in her handwriting. Tight, perfect cursive. No return address. No text or call to let me know it was coming. Just silence sealed in paper. I sat with it for hours before I opened it. Inside was a folded letter. 4 pages. Neat, controlled, like everything she did. It began the way she always spoke to me. "I'm sorry you feel the way you do. Not, I'm sorry for what I did." She went on to say she was heartbroken over the fallout, that I had blown things out of proportion, and that she and Dad made mistakes out of necessity, not cruelty. She wrote, "You've always been so strong, so self-sufficient. We assumed you didn't need us, as if erasing your child from your life and your will is just a logical extension of tough love. She said she wasn't angry, but she was devastated by the damage I'd caused to their reputation. She asked me to consider taking the files down to protect what's left of this family. No mention of Daniel. Not one word. As if he still didn't exist. The final paragraph was a masterclass in manipulation. She wrote, "You may have won, but you've hurt everyone. I hope it was worth it." I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in the drawer with the rest of the documents. Not because I needed to remember her words, but because I wanted proof of who she really was when I finally stopped pretending. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because she forgave me, but because I no longer needed her to. In the months that followed, the noise died down. Family group chats were abandoned. Holiday parties became smaller. My mother stopped posting smiling family photos. Max moved across the country, and Ella started therapy, something she never would have considered before. The family didn't collapse overnight, but the facade did. And that was enough. I didn't go back. I didn't need to. Instead, I poured myself into something new. I started journaling for real this time. Not just the events, but the emotions. The questions. The years I spent begging for scraps of approval, not realizing that I was never the problem. I was just the one who wouldn't play along. Daniel and I grew closer. We text daily. We meet for lunch every other Sunday. He jokes that I saved his life. I tell him he gave mine meaning. Truth is, we saved each other. Sometimes people ask me if I regret exposing everything, if I ever wish I'd stayed quiet. Not for a second. Because what I did wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. They left me out of the will because they thought I didn't need them. What they didn't realize was that I never wanted their money. I wanted a place, a name, a family that didn't punish me for being different. And when they refused to give me that, I created something stronger. Truth. The kind you don't need permission to tell. I didn't just reclaim my place in the story. I rewrote it. For anyone who's ever been cast aside, told they're too much or too independent or too difficult, let me say this. You are not a burden. You are not invisible. You are not a mistake. You are the part they couldn't control. And that terrified them.